Hello. I want to thank all of you for joining me for my first ever presentation for the Education Collaborative. I'm very excited to just talk a little bit about some of my thoughts on the power of choice and how we can use that to grow readers and learners. My name is Jenny Murray. I have a little bit about me. I have 30 plus years experience as a teacher and administrator, really all grades, pre-K through 12 and even adult, but mostly, and my passion is middle school. And for me, the middle school years are those grades 5 through 8. I know that lots of people can define those in different ways. So I like to say that I do include those 5th graders and those 8th graders when I'm thinking about middle school. The reason I love middle school is middle schoolers are at that age where they are choosing who and how to be. And every day they're coming in, and whether it's their outward appearance, choosing what they're wearing or their hair or how they present, or inwardly, how they are choosing what they believe and their values and who they want to be in the world as a person who is true to themselves and interacts with others. Middle school is just a hotbed of this, trying new things and changing and reflecting on it and feeling it, and I just love that. I know those of you out there who are also middle school educators and lovers know that we love this age group for the same reasons that many people might think they're a little bit challenging. So I want to ask, and I want to give you a few minutes as we prep for what I'm going to ask us to think about, and what I want to talk about is, what do you dream for your students, particularly your middle schoolers, when they leave you? And when they leave you might be your class, whether it's a semester or a year, or maybe your whole school program if you have a cohesive scope and sequence. So I want to just give you all a moment to think about that a little bit, what we hope and dream for our students. I'll just give you a minute to think about that. Okay, so I hope everyone has some really good thoughts. Some of those thoughts about what you're hoping for might be related to your content and might be related to how they are growing into the older people that they will be, how they're going from their young person to their older person. I like to think of who I want them to be in the world, and I know I want them to choose and be independent and to be able to make decisions to inform their lives and what makes them happy, be kind to others, confident in those choices, empathetic and flexible, able to adjust when choices or things that they're hoping for don't work as well as they'd like them to. And we want our students to be able to persist and consider and listen to others and question things and pose solutions. So all of those habits of mind are things that they will carry with them forever and ever after they leave our reading class or writing class or humanities class, whatever that is. And that's how we're helping them to grow into, like we said earlier, who they choose and how they choose to be. So how do we do that? If we say that's our goal, and that's a big, big goal and a really important and great goal and a life mission, How do we take those and what we know about project-based learning and reading workshop and apply that? What does that look like in our classroom? Well, I want to talk first about project-based learning. When we talk about project-based learning, a lot of the key words that folks talk about are authentic engagement and real-world problems and issues and situations that are personally meaningful to students and student choice. I want to propose and I want to think about that this is even more important in reading workshop. That if we're going to have students authentically engage with reading material, it has to be real to their world or a world they can imagine, maybe a real world of someone else, and they want a window into that world with the issues, with the situations that students feel and see and can empathize with for students their age and older and in their own lives. And that's what makes it personally meaningful. And to do that, I believe that it involves choice, allowing students to choose, allowing students to read varied material widely that they choose so that they can engage authentically with it. So another way to think about that, and we think about what we know about Reader's Workshop or project-based learning, is to think about who has the power of choice in our classrooms. I was very fortunate to attend several stages of workshops, and unfortunately my shout out is a little bit covered there by my video, but workshops with Organization Against Racism in Orange County, North Carolina, that does the Racial Equity Institute workshops. And one of the key takeaways out of many, many, many very valuable takeaways was what they called an individual power assessment. Power is neutral, and it's how we use that power that determines whether it's good or bad, maybe good for some people, bad for others, or individuals, or how that's perceived. So in the classroom, I like to think about what is my power as a teacher and how can I use that to empower my students. So one of the questions we can ask for an individual power assessment is to say, what is it like to have me in your life, to have me as your teacher? What is the impact of that? So we can think, what is the students going to remember for years and years when they're adults, when they think back to their time in my classroom? Are they going to remember that one book that we read, maybe that they did not choose, that I chose, or are they going to remember how I made them feel and how I empowered them to have agency over their lives? To think about that power, another question is, what is one resource I have control over in my institution? And if I do not apply that appropriately, what negative thing can happen? And then what next negative thing can happen? Or if I apply it appropriately, what are the positive outcomes? So honoring, I think, in a language arts reading workshop, honoring student reading choices about what they read, how they respond to their reading and discuss their reading and share their reading is a resource that I have control over, that I can empower and give to my students. So that individual power assessment is something that I like to think about in who has control in the classroom. So I want everyone to think about that for just a moment and just think about, if we take that choice away from our students, what are some of the negative outcomes that might happen from that? So just take a moment and give that some thought. Okay, I hope that sparked some really good thinking in your mind. Um, I think as much as we can empower students with choice, we are showing them through our example that we trust them to make choices, that they are capable of making good choices, that they can share those choices with others, and they can then use that power of their choice, to make the world the kind of place that they want to live and be in. That's those positive outcomes from choice. If we take away choice, the opposite. We might be telling our students that we don't think they're capable of choice, that they cannot make good choices, that they do not know how to make good choices, that they cannot impact others with their choices, and so on forth down the line. So again, that power of choice can help students create the world that they want to be and how they want to be people with agency in the world. So taking that now specifically from power and into Reader's Workshop, we all often like to say, reading is thinking, and I think a step further is thinking is all about choice. And choice is so much more than picking what you want to do from a curated list of books, or maybe your menu of ways to respond to reading at the end to prove you read a book or understood a book, or show that you have applied some meaning to that book, or even a task that you might do to get a grade on that reading. For this, I really like to take into account the work of John Spencer and A.J. Giuliani and thinking about design thinking. And I love this saying that student choice is so much more than picking a task. It is everything about owning the entire learning process. When we take away that choice, thinking about that power, again, that negative impact that can happen, we have taken ownership of the entire learning process or the entire reading process away from the students. So if we want something to be authentic, if we want something to be personally meaningful, going back to our project-based learning examples that so many of us use, we cannot do that without empowering students with real choice. And real choice is to make decisions about what those choices are, not just picking what we kind of tell them they can pick from. So for reading workshop, all of those choices that we can allow them to have, they can choose what books to read. They can choose why those books matter. They can choose how they make meaning from those books. So many books have many themes, many ideas, many relationships that can be pulled out. And at the time in middle school, all of those things might hit that reader at a time that is authentically, personally meaningful for them. So when we allow them to make that choice and say, this is why I connect with this situation, with this character, with this problem, with this theme, we are allowing the students, we are handing that power over to them. And then when they choose how to share that with others, we are valuing that power, valuing that voice, honoring it in the classroom, and then the students can take that and share that and feed that back and forth with each other. So that's really exciting for me when I get to watch that happen. So how do we do that? One of the ways that we need to do that is we can teach children, our students in our classroom, how to make choices. And when we do that, first we have to know our students. We have to know, what are they reading now? What do they like? And that might be certain genres, types of books, might be reading level, certain types of characters. That's okay. They're coming into us with a lot of knowledge about who they are as readers, and we need to know that so we can help them make those next choices that fit how they think of themselves as a reader, or maybe don't, maybe push them a little bit. I think it's really important here, and others have spoken a lot more knowledgeably and eloquently than I could. I learned from them about pointing out and honoring mirrors and windows and sliding doors for our students. I want to say that we all need to continue to do that research and share that with our students, and point that out to them, and point out to students when they're making a choice to read something that's very close to home and why they might choose that, and when they're making a choice to read something that is a window or a sliding door into another's experience, and honor that and talk about how that choice affects them and makes them feel. And again, so much of that can be said about that, and want to say that. And then we also want to honor all genres and formats: graphic novels, novels in verse, high interest, low reading level books, nonfiction, fiction. Everything is reading. We also do our students a great service when we teach them so many ways to choose books. I am a book shopper. I love nothing better than to go to the library or the bookstore and physically look at books, judge them by their cover sometimes, flip through them, and get my stack of books to read. That is one valid way to make choices, but it is certainly not the only way to make reading choices. We can teach our students to look and choose and shop for books, shop their reading list books online, reading reviews, reading recommendations from others, other students in our classrooms' reading lists. The most powerful way to create that community that makes and honors choices is to share with each other and trade those books and recommendations back and forth, and really allow that book shopping. With that, not every choice is a good one. Abandoning a book is more than acceptable. It is expected. If we want our students to be able to make choices and then adjust if that choice, whether it's about a book or life or anything, is not working out, we need to honor that and model that right in our readers workshop. So abandoning a book is expected. We need to do that as good readers. And I think it's really, really important to track our reading choices. Why did we choose a book? What surprised us about our book? Or how is it what we expected? What was some new learning from it? Why did we abandon that book? When we track that process, we are able to track the process of choice and really reflect on how choices work out, what we're learning from them, and how we make decisions about reading that we can apply to other things in life. So really honoring that and taking time to track those choices and think about how they worked out for good and for maybe not so good. Maybe the book wasn't our taste. So the other how I like to think about is the environment. So what can I do in my class? How can I set my room up, my environment, my maybe the first couple days and lessons in reading workshop? How can I do that to make this happen? First, we want to model for everyone reading widely. That can be tracking our reading, sharing books, having our list of books up. And we need to teach what exactly do we mean when we say reading. Is it just reading the book, discussing, responding? How do we do that? And then how do we teach collaboration and disagreement? And again, a little of that is cut off by my video, but I do want to do a shout out to my mentor, Smokey Daniels, and this is my favorite book of his many books, Comprehension and Collaboration. For me, it was transformative as a teacher for that very practical guide for how can I get my classroom set up and teach my students to have a discussion? How can I teach them to include others? What can I do? So I just want to give a shout out to that. Very transformative for me and many others, and then for our students. And I also think that when we allow students to talk about books, we just increase the enjoyment of any reading experience, even if it's that they abandoned a book. They are, our students and our middle schoolers are social creatures, and they should be. And we are all in the world together as a community. So when we share and talk and question and bring our different perspectives into the conversations, we get that growth and learning going. And sometimes we need to help them. So we want to set that up and make sure that we can do that. The other how that I think about a lot is very practical. You know, teachers are busy folks. Most of the schools I've been in, language arts in middle school is one class period for reading and for writing. I know that's not the case all over, and I would love to be in a school that's not, that had, 50 minutes or an hour for each. And I know for many of us, myself included, that is not the case. So time feels and is a valuable commodity. And as it's valuable, where we put our resources, this being time, shows what we value and the power we give to it. So I want to honor that we give time for students to find books, to share books, to recommend books, to simply sit and talk about books. Time to conference with each student. Time to honor and defend reading choices for the students, and time to celebrate and honor growth. I say that sometimes it sounds very simple, and yet at times it can feel for teachers not doing enough. I've heard so many teachers say, if we are passing the torch to our students and allowing them to read in small groups or talk in small groups while we confer with one or two students. And I just always want to point out that nothing could be further from the truth. When we empower students to use time and we give them times in ways that we find meaningful, we are sharing the most important power with them. And so very practically, we need to schedule time for all of these things that are so important for reading workshop. So the other thing, sometimes people ask, they'll say, what about assessment? If we're having all of this time and students are choosing their own books, and abandoning their own books and choosing the pace of their reading and how they respond to their reading, what they share about their reading, what's important. How do I assess that? How do I measure growth? And let's face it, assessment is valuable. It is important. We need to be able to say, our students did this and learned this in our classroom. So for reading, there are so many ways we can show growth. We know students' reading levels. We can read with them and we can say what they're comprehending and what their reading level is. We know the variety that students are reading. We know whether they're understanding that. We know their response in writing. Looks like that was a little cut off on my slide there with my format. But that's response in writing. And we know that they can make comparisons when they're discussing with others and they're saying, this was in this book and it reminded me of this one, or tell me about your book. Those are things we can see, we can show, we can assess, and then we can show as growth to our students so they see that, as well as to all the other stakeholders that matter. Their future teachers and parents and administrators. But we can also assess their habits of mind. We have their goals and reflections. We can do responses in writing. I used to think and now I think, because I read this book, and justifying that clarification. We see them in discussions when they're being kind to others or listening to others or being flexible in their thinking. All of that is growth that can and should be assessed and recorded. And it is all valuable. And I would say that that assessment, while we always want that for the future and we want future teachers to know that, as our middle schoolers are growing, we share that with them and their goals and their reflection, because if they can use that and own, this is where I started, this is something I learned or something I struggled with, and now this is what I learned. We are again handing over the power of that learning process to them. And they can then use that forever and ever and the rest of their lives. So just a few final thoughts that I want us to think about before we go is a few questions. How do you use your power for good in your reading workshop? So how are you using that power to empower your students? What are you modeling, showing, and growing in your students by how you have set up your reading workshop? The things that you control, the resources in your institution that you control, and how are you using that? And what does that show your students every day? And how can you use your valuable time to better prepare your students for the future that we cannot see? So those are some big questions that I like to take away. I like to think that it all comes down to choice. So if the more students are empowered to make important choices about what they read and how they make meaning from that, we are modeling and showing them that they are capable people who we trust to make important choices and grapple with complex issues, and people who are alike and different and everything in between from them. And that's the future that we cannot see, and yet we hope to empower our students to be fully engaged with. So thank you so much for your time. I hope you have been able to take a few things away from this, and I appreciate the conversation. Thank you.